Captain Thaddeus Moore stood at the bridge of the Odyssey, hands clasped behind his back, staring into the black void of space. The hum of the engines was almost drowned out by the murmur of his crew at work. Outside, the stars stretched like distant pinpricks of light, indifferent to the small, human vessel gliding silently through the cosmos. "Status report," Thad said, breaking the silence. "Nothing to report, Captain," Lieutenant Sarah Lennox replied from the comms station, her voice steady. "We're still a day out from the outer rim, no anomalies detected." "Good. Keep scanning," Thad muttered. His mind was elsewhere, caught between the promise of discovery and the weight of their mission, mapping the uncharted sections of the galaxy. Humanity had only just begun to explore the stars, but there was so much left to uncover. He was determined to carve humanity's place into the cosmos, one sector at a time. But as the minutes ticked by, an unsettling feeling gnawed at him. Something didn't sit right. It wasn't just the deep silence of space or the faint hum of the Odyssey's engines. It was that unshakable instinct, that little voice in the back of his mind telling him to pay attention, to be prepared. Suddenly, a sharp beep sliced through the quiet, dragging his attention back to the situation at hand. "Captain," said Commander Elias Voss, his voice laced with urgency. "We've got something." Thad's gaze snapped to the main console. On the far side of the screen, a blip appeared, a rapidly approaching object. Not a meteor, not a rogue asteroid. It was too organized. Too deliberate. "Distance?" Thad asked, already moving toward the tactical station. 20 minutes out, Captain." "It's large, very large." "Could be a ship," Elias replied, his fingers flying across the controls. "No markings. It doesn't match any known designs in our databases." Thad's heart rate kicked up, but he kept his voice calm. "Raise the shields. Prepare for anything." "Yes, Captain," Elias replied, his expression hardening. The crew moved with practiced precision, each person falling into their role. The Odyssey wasn't a massive ship, but it was fast, agile, and equipped with the latest human tech. The galaxy's largest empires wouldn't see them coming. Minutes later, the blip grew larger on the display. The ship appeared out of the blackness like a shadow from the depths of space, a sleek, angular vessel that shimmered in the darkness, its surface coated with a strange, glimmering metal. It moved with purpose, cutting through the void with an eerie stillness that suggested an overwhelming confidence. "Identifying now," Elias muttered, his fingers working the console furiously. This is no civilian ship." The hum of the Odyssey's systems seemed to vibrate louder as the object closed in. "Let's go ahead and say it's not a friend," Thad said, his voice low but firm. He glanced at his tactical officer, Lieutenant Minako Tanaka, whose sharp eyes met his. She nodded, fingers hovering above the weapon's controls. "Captain, we're not armed to fight something like that," Minako warned, the hint of tension creeping into her voice. "We can't take on a ship that size." Thad thought for a moment, his fingers tapping the edge of the tactical console. He needed to make a call, fast. The Odyssey wasn't here to fight, it was here to explore, to discover. But this wasn't an exploration anymore. "Send out a hailing signal," Thad ordered. "Let them know we're human." A brief silence followed. Then Minako's voice broke through. "Signal sent, Captain?" "Nothing." "Try again," Thad snapped. "Open a channel, see if we can at least get a response." A few moments passed before Minako's voice came again, tighter this time. "Nothing, Captain." "No response." "They're not acknowledging." Thad's brow furrowed. The ship's continued approach was unsettling. The Odyssey might be fast, but this unknown vessel was closing in too quickly to be ignored. They'd either be attacked or absorbed into whatever the ship was part of. The crew knew the stakes. The fact that the other ship was refusing to communicate only made it worse. "Raise the shields to maximum power," Thad ordered, his voice steady. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Let's see if we can outpace them." "Shields up," Minako responded. The ship hummed as energy surged through its systems. But before they could make the first evasive turn, the enemy vessel performed an unexpected maneuver. Without warning, it stopped, perfectly still in the void of space, and for a long moment, everything seemed to freeze. Thad could feel the hairs on the back of his neck rise. Then, a voice, cold and metallic, crackled through the communications system. "This is High Commander Oren Vith of the Galactic Empire. You are trespassing in Imperial space. Identify yourselves immediately." The words were clear, sharp, like a blade cutting through the tension. The very name sent a chill down Thad's spine. The Galactic Empire? He had heard the legends, the whispered tales of their dominance, but never did he expect to encounter them. For a moment, Thad said nothing. He glanced at his crew, their faces all reflecting the same disbelief and wariness. It was one thing to hear about the Empire, but another to be faced with it directly. Thad straightened his shoulders. This was it. The moment that would either mark humanity's entry into galactic politics, or seal their fate. "We are humans," Thad said, his voice firm. "We come in peace, and we are explorers." A pause, then the voice of Oren Vith echoed through the calms again. "Peace?" The voice was incredulous, almost amused. "You are weak. Inconsequential. You are nothing more than a curiosity to the Empire. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." Thaddeus Moore's lips curled into a thin smile. He knew the Empire, and he knew they were accustomed to bending the galaxy to their will. They hadn't encountered humanity yet. "We'll do no such thing," he replied, his voice steady, the smirk never leaving his face. "And we'll be doing the boarding, thanks." Oren's laughter crackled over the line, mocking. "You think you stand a chance?" the voice said, growing colder. "I will destroy you and your primitive vessel." Thad didn't respond. He didn't need to. Instead, he turned to his crew. They weren't here to play by the Empire's rules. They were here to show the galaxy who the humans were. "Prepare for combat. We're about to make history," Thad ordered. The first shots of the war had just been fired. The Odyssey rocked as the first volley of energy blasts slammed against its shields, sending waves of vibration through the ship's hull. Thad Moore steadied himself, gripping the edge of the console in front of him. The blast had been heavy, but not enough to breach the shields. Still, it sent a clear message: the Empire meant business. "Shields holding at 85%, Lieutenant Minako Tanaka reported, her voice calm but tense. "Keep them up. Prepare evasive maneuvers," Thad ordered, his mind already working through the next move. He wasn't going to let the Empire walk all over them, not without a fight. "Engage full thrusters. Give me a hard left, Minako." The Odyssey lurched as Minako engaged the thrusters, the ship swiftly veering left. The massive Imperial vessel, still a few kilometers out, followed the maneuver with frightening precision, its weapons charging for another strike. Thad gritted his teeth. The Empire's ability to react so quickly was a sign of just how far ahead they were in sheer firepower and technology. "We've got incoming, Captain!" Elias Voss, the commander, called out from the tactical station. His eyes narrowed at the targeting screen. "They're locking onto us with their primary cannons." "I know," Thad muttered. "We need to make them second-guess their attack. Let's show them we're not just sitting ducks." Another blast roared past the Odyssey, the shockwave rattling the ship's systems. The hull groaned under the pressure, but it held. Thad's mind raced, his eyes scanning the displays. The Empire was trying to box them in, to force the Odyssey into a predictable path. They were relying on brute strength, thinking the humans would crumble under pressure. Not this time. "Minako, drop the shields for half a second, just long enough to let their fire hit the side of the ship. Get ready to engage the maneuvering thrusters." Minako's eyes shot to Thad. "Are you crazy? That'll make us a target." "Do it. Trust me," Thad said, his voice firm. The room went silent as Minako hesitated for a heartbeat. Then, she punched into command, and the shields flickered out. The Odyssey veered into the line of fire, exposing its flank to the Empire's guns. For one split second, everything seemed to freeze. The targeting computer whined as it locked onto the exposed ship, and the Imperial guns fired. The blast slammed into the side of the Odyssey, the ship shuddering violently. A loud creaking noise echoed through the hull, and for a moment, it seemed like they might lose control. But then, Thad's voice cut through the chaos. "Now!" he barked. Minako slammed the thrusters into full reverse, and the ship jolted back into evasive maneuvering, rocketing away from the impact zone. The shield came back online immediately, absorbing the second wave of fire aimed at the Odyssey. The Empire's response was almost instantaneous. Thad could hear the crackle of the comms as High Commander Oren Veith's voice came through again, this time laced with a mix of frustration and disbelief. "Is this some kind of game to you, human?" Veith's voice was tight, a clear indication that the Empire's leader was starting to lose patience. "You cannot outrun the Empire. Surrender now, and we will consider your survival." Thad's lips twitched. His plan had worked, at least for now. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with the fire of a leader who knew exactly how to play the game. "You want us to surrender?" Thad's voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried across the comms like a slap to the face. "The Empire's greatest mistake was thinking you could push us around. But you've underestimated humanity." A pause, followed by the sound of Oren Veith's icy laughter. "You mock us, human? You are nothing but a speck in the grand design of the galaxy. Do you believe your insignificant ship can make a dent in the Empire?" Thad stood tall, his voice cutting through the static of the comms. "We don't just make dents, Commander," he said. "We make craters." Elias grinned at the tactical console. "We've got them on the ropes, Captain. They're not expecting us to actually fight back." Thad's eyes flicked to the screens as the Empire's ship began to reposition, clearly frustrated by the humans' unpredictability. The massive vessel wasn't as agile as the Odyssey, and the Imperial commanders were now shifting tactics, trying to outmaneuver them instead of relying solely on their firepower. "This is going to be a cat-and-mouse game," Thad said, his tone dripping with confidence. "We'll let them think they've got the advantage. Then, when they least expect it, we strike." "Are you sure this is wise, Captain?" Minako's voice carried the tension of the situation. "They're not going to stop until we're reduced to space debris. We've got something they don't," Thad replied, his eyes scanning the controls. "We've got adaptability. We think outside the box. They'll underestimate us at every turn, and that's their fatal mistake." "We've got another problem," Elias called out. "They're deploying fighters. Looks like they're trying to swarm us." Thad's eyes hardened. He had expected as much. The Empire was known for its overwhelming numbers. But what they didn't know was that humanity wasn't afraid of a fair fight. They were prepared to make it ugly. "Let them come," Thad muttered under his breath. Then he turned to his crew, his voice rising with renewed energy. "We're not running. Prepare the countermeasures. We'll take their fighters down, one by one." The crew went to work immediately, springing into action with a quiet intensity. Minako launched a volley of decoys to confuse the incoming Imperial fighters, while Elias recalibrated the targeting systems to focus on the smaller, faster targets. The Odyssey's weapons hummed to life, ready for the incoming swarm. In the distance, the Empire's fighters surged toward them, dozens of sleek ships cutting through the black like a horde of locusts. But they weren't prepared for the Odyssey's quick response. As the first wave of fighters closed in, the human ship swerved, dodging a barrage of laser fire with startling agility. "Locked on," Minako said, her voice calm but focused. "Firing." The Odyssey's cannons roared to life, cutting through the formation of Imperial fighters with deadly precision. Each shot found its mark, and one by one, the enemy's ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Oren Veith's voice crackled over the comms, now tinged with fury. "Enough of this," he spat. "You have no idea who you are dealing with, human." Thad chuckled, his grip tightening on the console. "Oh, we know exactly who we're dealing with, Commander. You're the Empire. You're the ones who've forgotten how to lose." The next round of Imperial fighters came in, but the humans were ready. The battle was far from over, but the momentum had shifted. The Empire's arrogance was its greatest weakness, and Thad intended to exploit it to the fullest. The Odyssey wasn't just going to survive, it was going to leave a mark. And the galaxy would know that humans had arrived. The Odyssey was battered but still functional. Captain Thaddeus Moore could feel the vibrations of the ship's frame resonating through the bridge as another barrage of plasma bolts slammed against their shields. The battle had become a deadly game of cat and mouse. Every maneuver, every counterattack, had been calculated with one thing in mind: survival. "Shields holding at 50%. Minako Tanaka called out, her voice steady but tinged with the pressure of the moment. "Engines still online?" Thad asked, glancing over at Elias Voss, who was bent over the tactical console. "Engines are good, but we're burning through fuel faster than expected," Elias replied, his face a mask of concentration. "We can't keep this up forever." "They're playing a war of attrition, Captain." Thad gritted his teeth. The Empire was used to dominating its opponents by simply wearing them down. And right now, they had the upper hand in terms of firepower, numbers, and resources. The humans had the advantage of speed and unpredictability, but that wouldn't last much longer if they didn't turn the tide soon. "Time to make them sweat," Thad muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. He stood up, his boots clicking against the metal floor as he moved toward the comm station. "Send another transmission. Let's see how they like a little bit of their own medicine." Minako raised an eyebrow. "Another taunt, Captain? You've got a better idea?" Thad shot back, his eyes burning with a cold determination. "It's not about what we can do now, it's about making them doubt their superiority." "Understood," Minako said with a small nod. She keyed in the command, and the ship's comm system crackled to life. "Commander Vythe, this is Captain Thaddeus Moore of the United Human Armada. If you're so confident in your Empire's power, why don't you come down here and face us yourself? Let's see who's really the inferior species." The transmission was met with a silence that stretched for a few moments, just long enough for Thad to wonder if the Empire had decided to cut off communication. Then, Vythe's voice came through again, colder and more dangerous than before. "You overestimate yourselves, human. But you are right about one thing: you are far too audacious. You are not worthy of our attention, but you will be remembered as a small footnote in the history of the Empire. Prepare to be erased." There was no more mocking, no more bravado. The Empire had stopped playing games. Thad's grin faded as the seriousness of the situation hit him. This was no longer a simple skirmish, it was a fight for survival. "Elias, do we have any kind of advantage right now?" Thad asked, already dreading the answer. Elias's fingers flew across the controls. "Not really, Captain. They're too fast, too strong. Their fleet is relentless. I don't think we can keep dodging forever." Thad leaned forward, thinking hard. They couldn't afford to get boxed in. The Empire was adapting. They had shown their cards, and now it was time for the humans to show theirs. "We don't need to win this with brute force. We just need to make them think we can," Thad said, his voice suddenly quieter. He turned toward the helm, where Minako was still monitoring the ship's trajectory. "I need to know every weak point in their fleet," Thad continued. "I'm talking anything, blind spots, signal interference, anything we can exploit." Minako's fingers hovered over the controls, but her gaze never wavered from the holomap. "There's a gap between their main fleet and the fighter division. It's not huge, but if we use the stealth systems, we might be able to slip through." Thad's eyes narrowed. That was the opening they needed. "Prepare the stealth systems," Thad ordered. "But only activate them once we're close enough to get in and out fast. I want us through that gap before they even realize it." As the crew set to work, the Odyssey began to maneuver, sliding around the outer edge of the battlefield. Thad felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. This was their last shot at forcing the Empire to question everything they believed about humanity. The next few minutes felt like an eternity. The Odyssey was no longer moving with the same swiftness it once had. Every inch of space they covered felt like it could be their last. Thad's fingers drummed restlessly on the console, his eyes fixed on the tactical map as the gap between the two fleets began to close. "Ready when you are, Captain," Minako said, her voice calm but tinged with anxiety. Activate stealth. Thad ordered, his voice steady but filled with resolve. A soft whir rang through the ship as the Odyssey's cloaking systems engaged, turning their vessel invisible to the Empire's sensors. Thad held his breath. It was a gamble. They had never used the system under combat conditions before. The ship drifted silently through the void, nestled between the massive warships of the Empire and the swarm of fighters. Every movement of the ship felt amplified in the silence, but somehow, the Odyssey moved like a ghost, slipping through the enemy fleet undetected. 5 kilometers to the gap, Elias reported. His fingers were tense on the tactical console, tracking the positions of the Imperial vessels. We've got a clear shot. Take it, Thad said, leaning forward in his chair, his eyes never leaving the screens. Minako punched into course correction, and the Odyssey surged forward, cutting through the gap between the Empire's main fleet and their fighters. It was a tight squeeze, but the humans were used to tight spots. They thrived under pressure. We're through, Minako said, her voice tinged with a hint of disbelief. Thad allowed himself a small breath of relief, but there was no time to celebrate. They still had to make it out. Elias, how's their fleet reacting? Thad asked. They're confused, Elias replied, eyes wide. They've lost track of us. They're scrambling. The Imperial fleet, so confident in their ability to corner the humans, now found themselves chasing phantoms. Thad knew this wouldn't last long. The Empire would adapt, but this moment of uncertainty was exactly what the humans needed. Keep them guessing. We can't stay in their blind spot forever, Thad said, his eyes narrowing as the battle raged behind them. Let's lead them on a chase. As the Odyssey streaked through the dark expanse, Thad could feel the turning point of the battle. The Empire had underestimated the humans. Now, it was time to make them pay for it. The Odyssey was now deep within the heart of the Empire's territory. Thaddeus Moore stood in front of the bridge's tactical display, eyes scanning the holographic map of the fleet. His mind churned, calculating the risks, evaluating their dwindling resources, and weighing every potential outcome. He could feel the hum of the ship beneath him, a reminder that the battle was far from over. The Empire was angry, and that anger had transformed their once pristine tactics into something more brutal, more relentless. We've lost contact with 2 of the fighter wings, Elias reported, his voice clipped. He was glued to the console, tracking every move the Imperial forces made. They're trying to recalibrate their sensors. It won't be long before they find us again. Thad's jaw tightened. The Odyssey's cloaking systems were barely holding out. He could sense the clock ticking down. If the Empire got a clear lock on their position, they wouldn't stand a chance. The Empire's firepower would obliterate them without hesitation. We've bought ourselves some time, but not much. We need to take the offensive now, Thad said, his voice low and steady. Prepare for a hit-and-run attack. We're going to hit their command ship directly. Minako's eyes widened. Captain, their flagship is heavily armored. It's surrounded by a dozen smaller ships. We can't just barge in. We don't need to barge in. We need to make them believe they're under siege, Thad countered. His mind was already working through the plan. Get me a targeting solution for their flagship. Elias adjusted the tactical readouts. Got it. I've locked on to the central command ship. I've also identified several weak spots in their shield configuration. If we hit them from the rear, we might cause a power failure. That's exactly what we're going to do, Thad said, stepping away from the console. Once we make that hit, we fall back. They'll think we're preparing for a full assault. In reality, we'll be right under their nose, watching them squirm. Minako's fingers danced over the controls, inputting the course adjustments as she aligned the Odyssey toward the heart of the Imperial formation. You're sure about this, Captain? We don't have the firepower to go head-to-head with their flagship. Thad looked at her, his gaze unwavering. We're not going head-to-head. We're going to make them believe we're bigger than we are. We've got the speed. Let's make it count. The ship hummed in response to the command, and they began their approach. The next few moments were crucial. Every second they spent in the heart of the Imperial formation brought them closer to discovery. Thad didn't hesitate, though. He knew that if they waited any longer, the Empire would regain control of the situation, and that would be the end of it. "We're in range, Captain," Elias said, his eyes flashing with anticipation. "Ready when you are." Thad inhaled deeply, his pulse steady. The gamble they were about to take would either mark humanity's first major victory or their final defeat. There was no middle ground. "Fire!" he ordered. The Odyssey's cannons erupted with sudden intensity, sending high-velocity plasma bolts lancing through the emptiness of space. The first shot hit the flagship's aft shields with a brilliant flash, followed by a secondary blast that caused a ripple across their energy fields. The ship shuddered as their systems struggled to redirect the energy from the blast, but it held. The Empire's flagship retaliated immediately, firing its massive turbolaser cannons toward the Odyssey. The sheer force of the blast was enough to rattle the ship to its core, and alarms blared throughout the bridge. "Shields at 30%, Minako called out, her fingers moving quickly to adjust the ship's trajectory. "We've got them rattled, but they're closing in. We need to move." Thad's heart pounded, but his mind was as clear as ever. "Engage evasive maneuvers. Take us in low, right under their weapons." The Odyssey dropped down below the trajectory of the incoming fire, just as the Empire's ship unleashed another devastating volley. Thad could feel the vibration of the ship as it barely dodged the next shot, the impact grazing the shields, but not breaking through. "We've got their attention," Elias said, a hint of a smile breaking through his usual stoic expression. "They're scrambling. Half their fleet's turning to engage us." "Good. They're overreacting," Thad said, barely able to hide his satisfaction. "This is where we make our move." "Captain, we're running low on fuel," Minako warned, her voice tight. "We can't sustain this hit and run much longer." "Our window's closing." Thad nodded, his expression hardening. "We've got one more strike left in us. Make it count." The Odyssey darted forward again, diving straight into the heart of the confusion. This time, they were closer. A thin layer of sweat dripped down Thad's temple as the flagship loomed larger, the massive Imperial vessel more menacing than ever. "Lock on to their central core," Thad ordered. "All weapons fire at will." The Odyssey's weapon systems flared once again, unleashing a concentrated barrage. This time, the shots found their mark. 1, 2, 3 direct hits to the central core of the flagship. The massive ship trembled under the force of the attack, its shields flickering dangerously before buckling entirely. There was a moment of stunned silence, and then, the first sign of a shift. The Empire's flagship, once so confident, was suddenly on the defensive, struggling to maintain control. Thad saw the panic ripple through their fleet, as the Imperial ships, no longer coordinated, began to lose formation. "They're losing their grip," Elias said, his voice a mix of disbelief and excitement. "The flagship is out of commission. Their command is disintegrating." "We've got them," Thad said, his words laced with an edge of triumph. "But we don't finish them off." "Not yet." The Odyssey surged forward again, firing another round of shots that peppered the weakening defenses of the Empire's ships. The Imperial fleet was no longer a unified force. It was breaking apart, each ship now left to fend for itself. The comms buzzed to life again, this time with a cold, seething voice. "This is High Commander Oren Vyth." The voice crackled through the speakers, dripping with venom. "You dare strike at the heart of the Empire? You will pay for this." Thad chuckled, his grip tightening on the armrest of his chair. "You've underestimated us, Commander. This isn't the end. It's only the beginning." With that, he turned to his crew, his expression one of determination. "We're not done yet. We've shown them what humanity can do, but we need to end this on our terms." The Odyssey raced toward the heart of the Empire's fleet, leaving behind a trail of confusion, destruction, and broken pride. The Empire had been shaken, but it wasn't defeated. Not yet. But the message had been made clear. Humanity wasn't going anywhere. And the galaxy would soon learn to respect them. The Odyssey drifted in the quiet aftermath of battle, its hull scarred and battered, but still intact. The once imposing fleet of the Galactic Empire was now scattered, broken into fragments of its former strength. In the distance, Imperial ships limped away, some trailing smoke and fire, others silent and drifting as their crew tried to recover from the chaos. For the first time, the Empire had tasted defeat, not at the hands of another empire, but at the hands of a small, unassuming human ship. Thaddeus Moore stood at the bridge, staring at the wreckage on the view screen, his face set in a mask of quiet triumph. His crew moved efficiently around him, performing their duties, their exhaustion evident in the way they moved, but their pride undeniable. They had done what no one, least of all the Empire, had expected. They had delivered a message. "Damage report, Elias," Thad said, his voice still calm, though there was a new edge to it, a weight that hadn't been there before. Elias Voss, commander of the Odyssey, didn't take his eyes off the tactical display. "We've sustained significant damage to our port side, but nothing critical. Shields are down to 30%, and our engines are operating at reduced capacity. We can limp back to the nearest dock, but we'll need some serious repairs." Thad nodded, taking in the information with the same focus that had driven him from the moment he'd first set foot on the Odyssey's bridge. He had been a commander before this battle, but today, humanity had earned its place in the galaxy. The Empire had underestimated them, and that had been their fatal mistake. "Good work, all of you," Thad said, his gaze sweeping across the bridge. The crew's fatigue was written on their faces, but there was something else, something harder, more resolute. "We've proven that we can stand toe-to-toe with the biggest and the most powerful. And we've shown the galaxy what happens when you don't take humanity seriously." Minako Tanaka, standing at the helm, turned her head, her eyes still sharp despite the long hours. "What now, Captain? The Empire's not going to let this slide. They'll be back. And next time, they'll come with everything." "Next time?" Thad said, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "There won't be a next time. Not for them. We've sent a message, Minako. We're not just some fledgling race looking to survive anymore. We're a power in our own right. The Empire knows it, and now, so does the rest of the galaxy." Minako's expression softened, though there was still doubt in her eyes. "You really think they'll back down after this?" "They'll rethink their strategy, at least. I don't think they've ever faced anything like us before. They're too proud to admit it, but they've learned that we won't be pushed around. We'll make sure they remember that," Thad said, turning back to the view screen. The sight of the defeated fleet, now nothing more than debris scattered across the stars, was a stark contrast to the booming arrogance of the Empire's first transmission. But Thad wasn't fooled. The Empire might retreat, but they would regroup, they would adapt. But this time, humanity would be waiting for them. "We've given them a taste of what's to come," Thad continued, his voice resolute. "They'll see us for what we are, a new force on the galactic stage. And we won't be ignored again." "Commander," Elias said, his voice suddenly serious. He glanced over at the communications officer, who was fiddling with the controls. "We're getting a message." Thad raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "Put it through." The comms crackled, and then the unmistakable voice of High Commander Oren Vythe filled the bridge. It was colder than before, but there was something else now, something that felt almost like respect. "Captain Moore?" Vythe's voice was crisp, calm, almost calculating. "You've proven yourselves capable. I will not underestimate humanity again. But know this, the Empire does not forget. We will not allow your kind to disrupt the order of the galaxy. But for now, we will let this go. Consider it a lesson in humility." Thad listened, his jaw tightening at the thinly veiled threat. "That's generous of you, Commander. I'll make sure to pass it along to the rest of the fleet." "You misunderstand," Vythe replied, his voice dropping to a more dangerous tone. "This isn't generosity. It's a warning. We are not finished with you." "We'll be ready," Thad said, his voice cold. "But I wouldn't waste your time thinking that this is the end of it. Humanity is here to stay." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, finally, Vythe spoke again, his tone colder than ice. "We'll see, Captain. We'll see. The comms cut off, and Thad let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to his crew. The tension in the air was palpable, but there was no fear. Only resolve. They'll be back, Elias said, his voice dark, but there was no doubt in his tone. But we'll be ready for them. We'll be ready, Thad agreed, his voice steady. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The Empire had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't do it again. Thad took a long look at the bridge, at his crew, and at the shattered remnants of the Imperial fleet in the distance. This was only the beginning. The battle had been won, but the war? That was still to come. And humanity, for the first time in galactic history, was a contender. Get us to the nearest dock, Thad said, finally breaking the silence. We've got repairs to make. And then we're going to make sure the Empire knows that this wasn't a fluke. As the Odyssey limped away from the scene of their victory, the stars stretched out before them, an open sky, limitless and full of promise. The galaxy was vast, and there was much more to explore, much more to conquer. And humanity, for the first time, knew they had the power to shape the future. The message had been sent. And the galaxy would never be the same.